the gender element of the diversity challenge is very particular and very large. MPA is the Major Projects Association. We are a membership body for companies that deliver major projects. So typical members might be Carillions, Laing O'Rourke's, big construction companies, the big projects like High Speed 2 and Crossrail. And our role is to start conversations, facilitate the sharing of best practice, and capture the lessons learned from all of those events. So as you'd expect, most of our members are in that construction and infrastructure field. Now, I've been with the Major Projects Association for almost 11 years now. The end of this month will be my 11th anniversary. I should have a party. And throughout that time, this is my image. This is what I see of the construction and infrastructure world. Now, I must point out that I don't go on site. I never see people on site dressed like that. This is a reflection of the Major Projects Association annual dinner. So we hold it in November every year, nice black tie event. We invite representatives of all our member companies to come. We get about 150 guests, and that's what each table looks like. Throughout the 11 annual dinners that I've been to, we've never had more than 20% of women. In fact, it's more about 15, 17%. And I know that because I do the seating plan. And we sit in the office and we take out all the women from the list and we put one on that table and one on that table and one on that table. And in the whole time I've been at MPA, it hasn't changed because this is what it looked like last year. Let me just go back and forth. There you go. The only thing that changes is the date at the top. Now, this isn't just a factor of MPA events. You could argue that we have a particular skew and we invite certain sorts of people. But many studies have shown that across the construction industry, you're looking at 9 out of 10 employees being men. And that figure has been fairly static for the last 14 years, never mind just the last decade. And I think that presents us with a really big problem. It's a really big challenge because we are facing a skills shortage. In the UK in particular, we know that unless we do something to address this skills shortage, we are not going to be able to deliver the very ambitious national infrastructure pipeline that the government has in plan. And that's going to place a lot of demand on the sorts of skills that everybody in this huge arena are going to be demanding. But even if it wasn't for that skills shortage, we do need to be recruiting different sorts of people into the construction industry because if we're not diverse, we are not attracting the best people. If all our teams are made up exclusively of one type of person, we're doing all of our projects a disservice. There's a huge amount of studies that say that diversity promotes hard work and creativity. And if that's all we want from our projects to be better, then we need to be looking at greater diversity in our delivery teams. And removing the barriers, particularly to female participation in male-dominated occupations, is worth billions of pounds. I'm just going to read this out. It's estimated that by removing the barriers to women working in occupations traditionally done by men and increasing further women's participation in the labour market could be worth between 15 billion and 23 billion pounds. Now that's a 2006 figure. I suspect it's even bigger now. And if you want even stronger evidence that we need to be addressing this issue, we have the recently published report by McKinsey, which looks at the correlation between diverse companies and financial returns. So the more diverse a company is, the better their financial return. And in the UK, gender diversity in particular has the biggest impact on that financial return. So for every 10% increase in gender diversity, earnings before interest and tax rose by 3.5%. I would say that's pretty compelling. So, this is about the next generation. We've got to do better for the next generation. We do have to avoid, as Anthony says, the pale, male and stale. We've got to try and address the stereotypes that are feeding into these occupational ghettos, which are at the heart of these figures. So what can we do? Well, there's actually a lot of work, very good work taking place in a lot of your organisations and our member organisations. And I think that on this issue, we shouldn't be keeping trade secrets. We should be trying to share the best practice as much as possible. So last year, we launched the Major Projects Association Gender Balance Initiative. We linked up with WISE, which is Women in Science and Engineering, to promote their 10 Steps campaign, which are 10 steps that if you follow them, that will help you to consider and to impact upon your gender balance within your organisation. And they talk about topics from leadership, recruitment, retention, promotion, so on. And I've put some little postcards on the tables over there which detail the 10 steps, so do please take those. So we've set up a special area of our website. You can see all those companies that have already signed up to the initiative, which I'm really pleased about since November. I think that's pretty good. We've got very useful links to the 10 Steps campaign, but also to other networks that might be useful within this field. We have some volunteers blogging about it for us, which is fantastic, because they're both young people who are adding their personal perspective on the things that we're learning throughout the process. And the key to the initiative is a series of events that we've been running, which look at lots of different issues and are bringing together people who are making changes within their organisations in order to try and improve their gender balance. So you'll be able to see our events on the website as well as any that are organised by other people. And we're also producing some very useful reports. So every time we have an event, we're capturing that and producing a report. And because I believe this is such an important issue, and because I don't believe in trade secrets when it comes to trying to improve gender balance and diversity, all of this information is publicly available. So if you go to our website, which is www.majorprojects.org, and click on the box that says gender balance, you can access all of this information, all of the reports. The events are for members only, but everything else is there for people to take and share and copy and do whatever you like. And do please, if you have success stories about what you've done in your organisation, do please contact me and share those as well. And I've also put 2 of our reports on the table as well, so do take a look at what they are. That's sort of it, but I do have a bit of an afterthought, which is that quite often when I talk about this issue, people say, look, this is about occupational segregation. This is about huge cultural impacts, about building being for boys and nursing being for girls, and it's very, very difficult to challenge and to change that culture. Well, I want to share 2 thoughts with you. The first is, I believe that yesterday you had a session on what would it be like to build on the moon. Now, I think if we're talking about building on the moon, we can probably talk sensibly about tackling this gender balance issue. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that I'm also involved in a very different, very male-dominated environment in which we have impacted on the gender balance enormously. This is me in my other life, my other persona. I'm a competitive powerlifter. I'm the world champion bench presser and the current world record holder in my weight and age category. I'm also the president-elect of the British Drug-Free Powerlifting Federation. And what we have seen in the last 11 years in powerlifting is a massive improvement in the numbers of women taking part. 700% increase in female participation compared to a 32% increase in male participation over the same period. And I think if it's possible for us, as a very, very macho, male-dominated sport, which has no money and which is run entirely by volunteers, to make that sort of change, to make that sort of impact, then I think it's certainly possible for all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Manon. I told you there was something else apart from construction in Manon's life, and I mean, it is absolutely, it's a very good point to end on. One of the things which I, having written about construction and infrastructure for 25 years, you're right about the fact that things haven't really changed a great deal.
No.
Going back, just picking up on your slide about events that you hold. I mean, do you think that the kind of events which bring the industry together and demonstrate what the industry is all about, i.e., these dinners, etc., are they the kind of things which are naturally women find comfortable being at?
I don't think they find them uncomfortable being at. I think they find them more comfortable if you make sure there's a better balance in the room. It does always feel uncomfortable when you're the only woman sitting at the table. We had our annual conference a couple of years ago, and a number of the women just happened to have met in advance and were chatting. So when we moved through to dinner, we sat on a table together, which meant there were 8 women at the table and 2 men. And I cannot tell you how much the men moaned and complained about, wasn't it peculiar, wasn't it awkward that they were in a minority, and reflected on what a strange... And we just said, this is our lives, sort of get over it, really. But I do think you need to make sure that we're looking for balance all the time.
Because well, I suppose the other thing which I also noted from conversations we had yesterday was that the skills that are required in the industry nowadays are becoming more and more diverse and much more different from how they have been in the past. And I think that we are seeing an increase in the number of women who are in the industry. But I mean, if you just reflected it by the people that turn up to events around the place, you perhaps wouldn't get that kind of you wouldn't see that difference.
I think certainly women and men have a very different attitude to networking. So when it comes to extracurricular dinners and events, that men are more likely to prioritise that than women. I think that's a message that we need to get through to the women, that actually sometimes you need to be seen.
And there are also certain bits of the industry. Architecture, for instance, is very female-dominated. I mean, what can engineering learn from architecture? I don't know. I maybe challenge you on that stat, Anthony. I mean, it was quoted yesterday that 70% of architects are men. So maybe it feels more female because you've got 30% of women, but actually, not sure. Question here.
Right. Do you think at a university graduate level that the construction industry could learn more from the financial services industry? Because there's obviously a bit of a skills vacuum there. And speaking as a recent graduate, any recruitment fair I went to, I did an arts subject, but the likes of KPMG, the likes of PwC, they literally had a blanket approach to recruitment, were willing to speak to anyone. Do you think perhaps the construction industry is a little bit guilty of just trying to source from traditional channels to a certain extent?
Absolutely, yes. And the way in which we in powerlifting made a difference is because we accidentally went outside of our normal recruitment routes. So typically, powerlifters come from the military, they come from particular powerlifting gyms. And what we thought was, well, let's just try and encourage more women from those routes to come in, get involved. It didn't work, made no difference at all. What happened was, CrossFit happened. People started to find out about powerlifting in a completely different environment, and then they came into it. So I think you're right, the recruitment routes are really important. Yeah, and talking to people within construction infrastructure who have come by the engineering route, they say that 5 years from graduation, they don't use those skills. So really, couldn't we just recruit an arts graduate and teach them the engineering?
It's a very good point. I remember getting in an awful lot of trouble at New Civil Engineer when I wrote a leader which basically said you don't need to learn maths anymore, you may as well study French. Anyway, yes. Manon, another subject. Manon, thank you very much for making a presentation and updating us on your thoughts about diversity and how we should really build it. So, Manon Bradley, round of applause.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.